Right now, a real victory for Ukraine, billions for Ukraine. Zelensky has crushed the Kremlin's hopes. No negotiations? Trump is sending even more weapons to Ukraine. The Kremlin is in panic. The German Chancellor is demanding 500 billion euros from Putin. Peacekeepers or special forces? What exactly will France and Britain send to Ukraine? Russian ships are sinking en masse. Is Ukraine involved? Russia's offensive has stalled. Missiles? No, something even bigger. Ukraine is launching its own air defense shield. A historic agreement. Ukraine is receiving superweapons from Britain. Putin did not expect such a blow. Panic on the stock markets. The US hasn't even started yet, and Russia is already losing billions. Russian oil and uranium are now banned. The Rome Conference is changing the rules of the game. The West is investing billions in Ukraine. And real hell is breaking loose in Moscow. Migrants are furious. All this and more in our program Hotspot. Shock. A tough statement from Zelensky. There will be no negotiations. Trump strikes at the Kremlin. Weapons are already on their way to Ukraine. 500 billion euros. Germany has billed Putin for the war. Europe is eager to fight. France and Britain are increasing their presence in Ukraine. A new blow to Putinomics. The EU is taking away Putin's last hope at a secret meeting between Lavrov and Rubio. Moscow is playing diplomacy again. The Ukrainian armed forces struck at the very heart of Russia's military-industrial complex, minus the MiGs and Kronstadt. All the details are coming up next.
There will be no negotiations with Russia. Zelensky stated that it's too early to talk about a third round of negotiations, and there are reasons for that.
We absolutely need to complete the significant results that the parties mutually agreed upon at the second important meeting, namely, to fully finish the detailed exchanges that were thoroughly discussed at the second meeting in Istanbul. And I think that in the near future, the relevant actions will be carried out. And only after that can the teams discuss preparing a meeting at the leaders' level.
Nevertheless, from Russia we have already heard about their readiness and their expectation for Ukraine to propose a date and place for the third round. And why are they in such a hurry? Are they eager to sign a peace agreement?
It's 100% a case of Russia trying to sell the third round of negotiations, primarily to the American president, to show that they are not stepping away from the track that is super important to him. But at the same time, through their concrete, real actions in various areas, they demonstrate that all these meetings in Turkey or potentially at any other venue today have no prospects and no ground to stand on.
Meanwhile, Trump's disappointment with Putin is growing. This time, the US president announced an important statement. But what exactly is meant remains unclear.
I'm disappointed in Russia, but we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. I think on Monday I'll make some important statements about Russia.
And also, as Reuters reports, for the first time since his return to the White House, Trump will use his presidential powers to send weapons to Ukraine. And the cost of this aid package is $300 million.
Indeed, the public rhetoric lately has been more positive. But let's not forget that just 2 weeks ago, the American administration, blaming the Pentagon, stopped supplying weapons to Ukraine. Indeed, it seems that Trump would basically like to rid himself of the burden of being the main peacemaker. But obviously, under pressure from the public, the media, his political allies and opponents, he is forced to act in some way.
But it's not just Trump who is expressing his disappointment with Putin. Recently, there was a meeting between Lavrov and Rubio.
The strategy is to continue engaging with all parties involved in seeking solutions to this conflict. We are ready to enter into dialogue whenever possible, as we did today. I reiterated what the president said. Both disappointment and dissatisfaction with the lack of progress in peace negotiations and in finding a way forward. Therefore, we will continue to engage.
While the US expresses disappointment and calls for peace, Lavrov doesn't waste any time and collects clippings. A sort of compilation gift for Rubio.
Just yesterday, I personally gave Senator Marco Rubio a carefully selected collection of direct quotes from prominent Ukrainian officials, specifically including President Zelensky, Prime Minister Shmyhal, Chief of Staff Yermak, and Presidential Advisor Podolyak, where they all explicitly and unequivocally talk about the undeniable and urgent need to completely destroy the Russian forces. Legally, or better yet, physically.
Well, what can I say? Putin is even losing Trump now once a potential ally and almost a friend. Could this really be the end?
So far, only the public rhetoric has changed. To draw any global conclusions, we need to look at the key indicators. And the key indicator here will be the package of weapons that the United States is preparing to deliver to Ukraine. If it all ends up being limited to a $300 million package, then it's clear that Trump will continue to try to build constructive relations with Putin so that he can later use him in a potential war against China.
Well then, Putin, get your money ready. The Chancellor of Germany has demanded that the Russian dictator compensate Ukraine for the damages.
We estimate the damage at around 500 billion euros. Russia must compensate for this damage. Until that happens, Russia will not gain access to the frozen assets.
The European Commission wants to change the sanctions scheme and introduce a floating price cap on Russian oil. That is not a fixed price as before, but one that will change depending on the market situation. This way, the EU aims to hit Russia's revenues without harming the global economy.
This is a real victory. Billions for Ukraine. The West is launching a recovery plan. All of Europe stands with Ukraine. The results of the conference shocked the Kremlin. Investors are on the offensive. Over 1,000 companies are ready to build a new Ukraine. This is the end for Putin. A new Marshall Plan for Ukraine. Find out what was decided in Rome coming up next.
The Conference on Ukraine's Recovery in Rome. This is already the fourth high-level international meeting. The previous conferences were held in Lugano, London, and Berlin. The Ukrainian delegation was led by the first Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy of Ukraine, Yulia Sviridenko. URC 2025 is organized by the governments of Ukraine and Italy, with the participation of the European Commission, international financial institutions, business representatives, civil society, and local authorities.
Investing in Ukraine means investing in ourselves. Everything that happens in Ukraine concerns each and every one of us.
The main goal of the conference is to mobilize political, financial, and technical support for Ukraine. In particular, this will be achieved by attracting private capital, supporting human potential, restoring regional communities, and promoting Euro integration reforms.
As part of this support, I am announcing that the EU is transferring 1 billion in macro-financial assistance to Ukraine, dear Volodymyr. I am also announcing the disbursement of 3 billion euros under the Ukraine Facility Program. And these grants and loans will mobilize 10 billion in investments.
Our message to Washington, to President Donald Trump: stay with us, stay with Europe. We are striving for the same thing. We need a stable political order in this world. All of us, Europeans and Americans, must stand together. These are our shared ideals.
Ukraine has the opportunity to offer European businesses and state corporations, with the support of their governments, broad defense cooperation, including investments in the defense industry.
At this conference, we see the opportunity to sign many agreements in various fields. The message we want to convey to businesses is, don't be afraid to take part in Ukraine's recovery, because these are successful investments in a country that is demonstrating its resilience.
During his visit to Italy, the President of Ukraine held a meeting with the U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg.
A substantive conversation with the US President's Special Representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. I thank him for participating in the Ukraine Recovery Conference. The General is leading the American delegation. We discussed arms supplies and strengthening air defense. Amid increased Russian attacks, this is one of the priorities. We also talked about purchasing American weapons, joint defense production, and localization in Ukraine.
The main focus was on sanctions policy and the upcoming adoption of another package of U.S. sanctions against Russia. We discussed the purchase of American weapons, as well as joint defense production in Ukraine. After a pause, the U.S. has already resumed the supply of ammunition and missiles to Ukraine. 155mm artillery shells and GMLRS tactical missiles are already on their way to Ukraine. Zelensky met with Italian President Sergio Mattarella in Rome. He thanked the Italians for supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as for their assistance. They discussed the return of Ukrainian children forcibly taken to Russia, European integration, sanctions pressure on the Russian Federation, and the establishment of a special tribunal for the crime of Russian aggression against Ukraine.
Our position is and remains absolutely firm, and I would like to express our admiration for the Ukrainian people, who are proving that we must provide full support and protection to your country.
Zelensky thanked the country's authorities for organizing the International Conference on Ukraine's Recovery and for the fact that Italian businesses are interested in participating in the reconstruction of Ukraine after Putin's invasion.
We have a sincere and devoted friendship with Ukraine. Italy firmly supports the Ukrainian people. The intensified attacks on the population and civilian infrastructure by Russia once again prove that we need to support Ukraine. At the same time, we are seeking a way to bring this dramatic situation to an end.
At the meeting with the Pope, Zelensky thanked the Vatican for its willingness to take on negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. This was already the second audience of the President of Ukraine with Pope Leo XIV since his election. Ukraine has expressed its readiness to hold meetings at the leaders' level in the Vatican to stop Russian aggression.
Of course, we absolutely want peace. We truly want this devastating war to end. We are counting very much on the Vatican and His Holiness to help provide a suitable venue for a high-level leaders' meeting to effectively put an end to this ongoing war.
Zelensky thanked the Pope for the meeting and invited him to visit Ukraine. Following the conference, the Lithuanian government decided to allocate €1 million, which will go toward the reconstruction of Ukraine from 2025 to 2027. The total budget amounts to €37.5 million. The program is funded by the European Commission. In addition to Lithuania, Denmark, Germany and France are also participating.
Ivan, thank you too.
Thank you.
Urgent. Russia's summer offensive is at a standstill. The Ukrainian armed forces are holding the front. Shocking video, the invincible Russian tank blown to pieces. Putin is in a panic. Ukraine is creating its own Iron Dome. The new air defense system will change the rules of the game. Deal of the century. Britain is arming Ukraine's air defense to the teeth. Drones in the heart of Russia. What's burning in the Moscow region? Find out all the shocking details right now.
Another surge of Russian troops, better known as the Summer Offensive, has reached its climax. The Pokrovsk and Novopavlivka directions have become the leaders in the number of combat clashes. The situation has also escalated in the Kharkiv and Zaporizhzhia regions.
The fighting is only now reaching its most intense climax, and that's happening in several directions at once. The point is that the Russian Federation does not tie the plans for carrying out the so-called special military operation tasks to specific deadlines.
According to the number of combat engagements, as reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, there was a certain decline in occupier activity at the end of June and the beginning of July. However, closer to mid-July, this figure began to rise again and is now holding at around 180 combat engagements per day.
The occupiers are well aware that the assault on Sloviansk and the Kramatorsk agglomeration could drag on for more than a year. For comparison, the assault on Bakhmut, a small city in size compared to this agglomeration, took 9 months. The occupiers' losses during the street fighting for Bakhmut amounted to about 100,000. Enormous losses. That is why the occupiers are well aware of the prospects and possibilities for further advancement in the Donetsk region, and accordingly, the challenges they face.
Fighters from the 28th Brigade have published a spectacular video of repelling an assault by the occupiers, in which more sheds appeared. It is precisely these that the enemy constantly uses in their attacks.
The Russians are trying in this way to preserve the remnants of their heavy armored vehicles and prevent Ukraine's defense forces from actively using them. Accordingly, these tank sheds are also used for demining certain sections of the front or breaking through with assault groups, including with the use of cars and motorcycles. And accordingly, they can also serve as mobile electronic warfare systems at times.
According to the soldiers, it took about 60 FPV drones to destroy this structure, as it was very difficult to find a weak spot.
There are quite a few examples of objective evidence confirming the destruction of these tank sheds. This shows that for every so-called invention by the Russian side, Ukrainian defenders demonstrate equally effective countermeasures.
According to the data available to Ukraine, Russia plans to launch up to 1,000 drones at a time against our country. Our defenders have found a solution to this problem and can shoot them down using interceptor drones.
No one will use Patriot air defense systems to shoot down drones, given their domestic cost compared to the cost of a Patriot missile. and accordingly, interceptor drones are not an alternative to the Patriot air defense system.
According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the logic of the aggressors is clear. Dictator Putin, through massive drone attacks, primarily wants to destabilize Ukrainian society. Ukraine will respond to the attacks, but for this, rapid funding from partners is needed. The United Kingdom and Ukraine yesterday signed a historic agreement regarding THAAD air defense missiles. The agreement will allow the supply of more than 5,000 air defense missiles, which will not only significantly strengthen the UK's defense capabilities, but will also enable Ukraine to continue its fight by enhancing its protection against Russia's illegal full-scale invasion. The British partners will also provide Ukraine with assistance amounting to £283 million through the year 2026. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that Berlin is ready to purchase Patriot surface-to-air missile systems from the United States for subsequent transfer to Ukraine's defense forces. In addition, Merz promised to continue supporting Ukraine and reminded that the European Union is preparing a new package of sanctions against Russia. French President Emmanuel Macron stated that his country and Britain intend to increase the number of joint expeditionary forces to 50,000 troops for future deployment in Ukraine as part of the Resolute coalition. Macron clarified that these forces, which could be increased fivefold from their current number, will have a core formed around France and Britain and will be able to unite other European partners.
The main intelligence directorate carried out a special operation in temporarily occupied Melitopol. An explosion occurred on the premises of one of the enterprises where the Russians had set up locations for personnel and military vehicles. As a result of the operation, 5 members of the Russian National Guard were eliminated and a command and control station was destroyed. The Ukrainian General Staff also confirmed strikes on the Russian Shipunov Instrument Design Bureau, which specializes in the production of air defense missiles. The Lukovitsi-Voronin aviation plant was also hit. This enterprise carries out the full range of operations, from mechanical processing of parts to final assembly, flight testing and delivery of Russian MiG combat aircraft. Explosions and a fire have been reported on the premises of the facility, from a statement by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Russian troops continue to attack in several directions. In the Lyman sector, the Russian army launched assaults near the settlements of Novoyegorovka, Grekovka and Torske. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian forces attempted to advance in the areas of Miroliubivka, Novosergeyevka, Udakhne, Alexievka and towards Pokrovsk. And in the Novopavlivka direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled enemy attacks near Zaporizhzhia, Podupne, Novoselka and Zeleny Pol.
Southwest of Pokrovsk, once again, the enemy is active. They are concentrating there to advance toward the Dnipropetrovsk region.
Our forces are holding them back, repelling their attacks. The enemy keeps trying to break through again. So here, of course, it's not just a military aspect, but also a military political one. The enemy needs to demonstrate action in a new region.
Meanwhile, in the Kupiansk direction, drone operators from the 1st Presidential Brigade of the National Guard, the Burevi, destroyed a multiple rocket launcher system from North Korea. The North Korean towed launcher Type 75 was only recently spotted at the front, but it didn't last long there. And soldiers of the 24th of September, a 8th Mechanized Brigade named after King Danilo, destroyed a Russian army armored vehicle along with its landing party. Russian occupiers advanced in an infantry fighting vehicle with troops toward Ukrainian positions in Chasiv Yar, but were spotted while still approaching. During the battle, the armored vehicle was destroyed by fire, and enemy motorcycles, a pickup truck and a quad bike were also eliminated. Russia may have lost approximately 236,000 soldiers killed and wounded in the war against Ukraine in just the year 2025. This was reported by British intelligence. British Foreign Secretary David Lammy previously stated that the losses of Russian forces indicate that Vladimir Putin is using Russians as cannon fodder.
The Russian leadership uses its people as a resource to achieve its goals. Well, the main goal is to compel Ukraine to accept the conditions of the Russian Federation. We could list these conditions once again, but I think everyone has heard them and they are clear to all. But after all, the leadership's position is one thing and the situation on the ground is another. That is the moral and psychological state of the Russian army. The soldiers of the Russian Federation who are on the front lines is a somewhat different story.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The US oil strike is slashing Kremlin revenues by billions. Uranium is under a ban. Russia is losing a strategic export. Catastrophe is inevitable. The US is preparing an economic blockade of the Russian Federation. Tariffs are like a nuclear strike. Russia's economy is bursting at the seams. We haven't even started yet. The White House promises to finish off the bunker leader's economy. To find out what happens next, keep watching. Sanctions that break bones, that's how US Senator Lindsey Graham described a bill capable of changing the rules of global energy trade and striking not only at Russia, but also at its largest buyers. First and foremost, these are, of course, China and India, which today account for about 70% of Russia's oil, gas, and uranium exports.
The goal of this bill is to break the vicious cycle in which China, a communist dictatorship, buys oil from Putin's Russia at below market prices, giving its war machine the means to kill innocent Ukrainian civilians.
The document has already received support in the US Senate and may be approved in the coming days. It provides for the introduction of 500% tariffs on the import of oil, gas, and uranium from Russia for all countries that continue to trade with it. The only exception will be for those who simultaneously provide military and economic support to Ukraine. In effect, the United States is offering its partners a choice: either break ties with Russian energy resources or face a devastating blow to their own foreign trade. In the case of China, which purchases millions of barrels of oil daily, this is a challenge of strategic proportions.
I do not rule out that Trump may announce such steps, specifically announce them after the adoption of the relevant law, after the relaxation of regulations that would grant the president the right, but not the obligation, to impose the corresponding sanctions. And obviously, here Trump can act following a recent example, as he announced as well. For instance, he might say that tariffs will be imposed in a month, giving that month as an opportunity to conduct negotiations, thereby stimulating the negotiation process, and at the same time pressuring China to put pressure on the Russian Federation in order to end the active phase of the war.
Trump and his inner circle have run out of patience. They were counting on one thing, and most of the negotiators, including Dmitriev, Ushakov, Lavrov, and Putin himself, promised one thing, talked about one thing, but it turned out completely differently. In this case, Trump doesn't like that he was made to look like a weakling and a clown running errands for Putin, a person who has been fed piles of nonsense, who has had kilograms of this noodle hung on his ears by Putin, and his entourage naturally feels humiliated and wants to change the situation. For him, this is, of course, a reputational blow.
But is Trump really ready to move from words to action? According to the politician, the 47th President of the United States does not object to the law, but sets a condition: no micromanagement from Congress. The White House insists on preserving exclusive presidential powers, including the right to unilaterally lift sanctions.
In the current version, the president's foreign policy decisions will be subject to micromanagement by Congress through a joint disapproval procedure. This is unacceptable to us, stated one of the US officials.
If a compromise is reached, America will gain a powerful lever of pressure on Putin and everyone who trades with him.
We will see a drop in the ruble exchange rate, possibly by 5 to 10 rubles, maybe more, against the US dollar. But this is situational, and the rate will recover. The same applies directly to the stock market. But in the broader stock market, I truly think the significant changes will be even more profound and impactful, since if Donald Trump possesses the undeniable ability to impose extremely high 500% tariffs, specifically on the major buyers of Russian energy resources, this will directly and severely hit the entire energy sector, and consequently the overall capitalization of the relevant specialized companies. That is, the capitalization of energy companies will be seriously affected. Therefore, in this case, of course, from an economic standpoint, there are significant risks directly for the Russian Federation, even from the threat, the real threat of such restrictions being imposed, not to mention their actual implementation.
That's true. The Russian financial market is already reacting. At the close of trading on the 9th of July, the Moscow Exchange Index plummeted to 2,696 points, the lowest level since early April. The drop for the day was more than 2%, and the market capitalization shrank by 140 billion rubles. Shares of the largest companies, Gazprom, Lukoil, Rosneft, Magnit, Montana S, Aeroflot ended up in the red. And while sanctions are still just being discussed overseas, Russia is already feeling their effects through losses on the stock exchange, investor panic, and threats to its export-driven model. But the main blow is still ahead. The hunt for Putin's tankers is in full swing. The phantom bunker fleet will no longer save his oil. A powerful blow to the Kremlin's black gold. Russia's mysterious vessels are going under. Explosion after explosion, the destruction of shadow tankers is reaching a new level. Prices are falling, risks are rising, allies are disappearing. Putin is furious. Who is behind the attacks on Russia's shadow fleet? Stay tuned.
The vessel Sea Charm, damaged in January 2025 off the coast of Turkey, and the tanker Sea Jewel, which nearly sank in February in Italy. Next, the Koala vessel, which exploded in the Russian port of Usluga, and the Grace Ferrum, damaged off the coast of Libya in that same February of 2025. And finally, the tanker Villa Mora, which suffered an engine room explosion just yesterday, on the 27th of June. The hunting season on Putin's fleet is now open. And in addition to the now familiar threats from Ukrainian aerial and naval drones, the Kremlin's shadow logistics have encountered a new scourge.
A series of mysterious attacks on oil tankers using limpet mines has shaken the shipping world, sparking speculation that the explosions are part of a sabotage campaign.
Limpet mines are not a new technology. The first of these were invented by the Germans back in World War II. Thanks to their special shape and attachment system, such a charge could burn through the armor of even the thickest tank.
Designed to utterly destroy tanks, its powerful shape charge meticulously pierced armor by using a remarkably thin jet of focused metal moving at incredible speeds of up to 14 kilometers per second.
However, no one had ever done anything like this underwater before.
Perhaps some very kind, intelligent octopuses are diligently dealing with these large Russian tankers, just like this one.
As it turned out, quite similar problems occurred in different parts of the world with companies that seem to have nothing to do with each other. But all of them, in one way or another, are connected to Russia's shadow fleet. It is through them that Putin exports his black gold.
This is the fifth tanker in a row to suffer from similar unexplained explosions just this year. All these vessels had ports of call in Ust-Luga, Novorossiysk, and so on. In other words, all these ships are part of the Russian shadow fleet and transport Russian oil that is under sanctions. Of course, at this moment, we genuinely don't know who precisely did this or what exactly is truly happening in this unfolding situation, but it's very, very telling, very much so indeed.
Since all the affected vessels had called at Russian ports shortly before the attacks, this led to speculation in the press that Ukraine was involved in the explosions. And while official Kyiv remained silent, Ukraine's military intelligence, in its recent report, classified the latest damaged vessel as part of the Russian shadow fleet, which suggests that Ukraine may indeed be indirectly involved in the maritime explosions.
This leads to the fact that they effectively lose momentum and, let's say, disrupt business deliveries. If the number of such vessels experiencing these kinds of accidents and damages increases, it will affect the frequency of such voyages, causing them to decrease.
At the same time, even if Ukrainian special services are involved in what's happening, experts assure that no one has been attaching mines to tankers all over the open sea. Most likely, we are talking about a combined operation involving several types of attacks.
Most likely, this was some kind of planned action. It's possible that it was some sort of sabotage. Again, this tanker from the Shadow Fleet most likely has some criminal element involved, and it cannot be ruled out that the explosion was actually the result of these criminal factors and their activities.
5 attacks on Putin's Shadow Fleet in the past 6 months have significantly reduced the already meager list of those willing to continue trading with the Kremlin. Those who weren't scared off by looming Western sanctions have changed their minds after hearing about the prospect of simply going down with all their cargo, whether off the coast of Libya, in other parts of the Mediterranean, or even in Russia itself.
Those involved in this rather unsavory business transporting Russian oil under sanction shape now started to additionally inspect their tankers, including from the outside, even bringing in divers to make sure there are no bottom attached devices, mines, and so on.
Such precautionary measures are costing ship owners a pretty penny. As a result, doing business with the Kremlin is simply becoming unprofitable.
Now, oil delivery routes are being reconsidered, and insurance agents are revising coverage terms. In other words, the risks are increasing very, very significantly. And this is a signal to the market. Using tankers from the shadow fleet is becoming highly risky, both from an insurance safety perspective and, of course, in terms of legal liability.
If today Russia's shadow fleet numbers by various estimates up to 1,000 vessels, then after the latest explosive news, that number could drop to just a few hundred. But even those remaining are unlikely to sail the seas for long after an inevitable encounter with Ukrainian intelligence or marine octopuses.
Shock! Real hardcore from Russia. The Kremlin is collecting personal data on migrants. They will even monitor children. A digital Profilia new prison without bars. Putin's secret plans have been exposed. Migrants will be sacrificed. The bunker dweller demands cannon fodder. All the details are coming up in the report. In Russia, they've reinvented the wheel again only. Now it's digital and it's rolling over migrants. The Kremlin has decided to create unified digital profiles for all foreign citizens in the country by the 30th of June, 2026.
They've got quite a thorough plan.
This profile will collect every possible piece of information, from border crossings to the level of Russian language proficiency among their children.
All sorts of data will go in there. Let's not forget that digitalization is in full swing in Russia these days. And in fact, they're also trying to digitize all Russians and push everyone onto government services.
On paper, everything looks great. Supposedly, this is needed for the country's security, maintaining public order, and some kind of perfect migration policy. Well, it sounds serious, but honestly, it feels like an excuse.
This is basically for complete record keeping, because the military enlistment office is one story. But there's another story as well. Yes, let's take a look. The situation with the Azerbaijani diaspora, which is being pressured almost all over the country. Of course, most of them are actually Russian citizens, but there are also citizens of Azerbaijan. And accordingly, we need to understand that there are many different diasporas in Russia. And of course, the authorities want to bring all of them under control. Accordingly, they need to know where people are located. Because if people are all in one place, or rather, if they know where they are, they can control them.
It seems that the Kremlin has decided that if they can't keep track of their own people, they should start with outsiders. Especially if those outsiders have a suspicious accent.
I think Russia basically has no image left at all. But as we can see, sometimes there are strange people who still want to go to Russia. Literally, the latest news is that I think his account, or a prince, Pyotr Sheremetev, 95 years old probably because of his age, he's already experiencing some mental issues, wanted to return to Russia. Of course, there are such figures who are under the influence of Russian propaganda, but many others are also under the influence of Russian propaganda.
And now it gets even more fun. In 2022, the Kremlin discussed how to expand the list of those subject to military service by including migrants. Basically, you come to Russia, pass a Russian language test, and voila, you're mobilized. Makes perfect sense.
Now they need to run as many migrants as possible through the military enlistment offices. Maybe someone will take the bait, maybe they'll manage to sign someone up as a contract soldier. And after that, it's all about registration and control. It's practically Lenin's thesis, registration and control. As long as the Kremlin has money to pay those benefits they're paying, yes, they can partially replenish the ranks with migrants, because frankly, Russia's poor regions are already running out.
They'll be collecting everything. Diplomas, information about property, accreditations. Officially, it's all to keep things under control. But it looks more like a way to keep people on edge.
Russian concern for order is itself a form of pressure, because the only way they know how to care is by throwing everyone in prison. So yes, this is Russian-style concern for order. To build new colonies now, the FSB can set up their own colonies and everyone can just sit there. That's the perfect order. Although in reality, the only truly perfect order is in a cemetery. That's why the Russian government also takes care to keep the cemeteries filled.
The bottom line is simple. In Russia, they've once again decided to digitize everything, just in case. Who are you? Where are you from? What about your diploma, your apartment, and your children? Now all of this has to be in a single system. Officially, it's for order, but in reality, it's to know everything about everyone, even if you just came here to work.
That's all for now. And for more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.